Yes, good morning everyone. Once again, we are back to Leigh Hunt as an essayist. This is the part 2 of our discussion where we are going to take up Hunt's character sketches in continuation with what we have already discussed from yesterday's discussion. Now let us move forward. Hunt's character sketches, with their precise details and subtle humor, also had their antecedents in his letters. For example, in a letter to Marianne dated July 24th, 1806, Hunt gives a character sketch of Mr. Ong, the Russian husband of the sister of one of Hunt's old school friends. The man is good natured and hospitable and seems very fond of his wife. But he is not glowing with youth and with fancy. He is not a poet. He is not a painter. He is not a musician. In short, he ought not to have married Charlotte Pependake, or I should say, Charlotte Pependake ought not to have married him. Every man is in the right to get as good a wife as he can. But that is no reason why a woman should put up with an indifferent husband. I wonder we never heard amidst all the celestial intrigues of the loves of Venus and a Dutch of tobacconist. A similar touch of humor among the details, along with the same balance and parallel structure, is found in Hunt's description of The Monthly Nurse, published in 1840. Humor is also an important characteristic feature of Leigh Hunt's essays. Yes, here is an example from The Monthly Nurse. She takes snuff ostentatiously, drams advisedly, tea incessantly, advice indignantly, a nap when she can get it, cold whenever there is a crick in the door, and the remainder of whatever her mistress leaves to eat or drink, provided it is what somebody else would like to have. Hunt has not only a pleasant and finished way of telling anecdotes, which he occasionally inserted into his essays, but a way of creating a realistic sense of dialogue. Again, he had previous practice in his letters, as when he included an anecdote about actor and comic Samuel Foote in a letter written sometime before July 1809 to an unknown correspondent. Here it goes. I'll tell you an anecdote of Foote. He was very ill for a week or more, and some medical friend sent him a filial or physic. His friend called on him a day or two after. How do you do, Mr. Foote? Ah, you look a little better. Pray, did you follow my prescription? Follow your prescription? Doctor, God forbid. It would have been my death. Been your death? How so? Why, man, I threw it out of window. An example of an anecdote from a published essay, Beds and Bedrooms, shows similar simplicity, polish, and humor. But Hunt also included extended narratives in his essays, and the amusing story he wrote to Marianne on June 11, 1808 about his journey by coach to Harburg in Leicestershire might have been included in any number of his essays. Here it goes thus. All yesterday I was jammed up in a hot coach with a silent farmer, a sleepy lisping young man, and a Reverend Wigsby of the usual dimensions, who rallied against the Unitarians and, what was worse, gave me no room for my legs. These three youths soon went to sleep, and I must own I had no snoring, but the parson, by way of caution against cold, had almost entirely pulled up both the coach windows. My legs felt as if they were in the stocks, and his huge beaver, as he nodded, not only played up and down before my face in a manner that almost made me laugh, but tumbled off upon me every now and then, so that I expected his wig to follow every instant. However, I waked him with much civility to return his head, and then he used to start and grin and snore and smile at me, I suppose by way of apology. I longed to have all their faces in a vise as usual. Once I fondly imagined he was going to be polite, for he made me change sides with him, and I looked upon this as no small generosity, as he was on the best seat. But lo, when I altered my situation, I found the sun coming full upon my face. Nothing could have been better done, oh Mr. Parson. Because of his adeptness at telling a tale, which he did occasionally in his essays, it is surprising that Hunt wrote only one novel, and that is not a very successful one. An example of a characteristic tale, which incidentally also demonstrates Hunt's dictum that a perfect tale should have a moral utility, is the ghost story he tells of Bavarian, whose frequent angry outbursts had finally worn to death his sweet and patient wife. She returned to life when remorse caused him to lose his rage, and for 2 years they lived peacefully. But then gradually his fits of temper began to reassert themselves. Some of the most characteristic features in Hunt's familiar essays, descriptions of places, character sketches, anecdotes, and narratives were anticipated in his early letters, as we discussed earlier. But there are other significant qualities which make Hunt's essays better than they are generally given credit for being. For one thing, he was a very close observer, and he caught essences in detailed and vivid descriptions of people, such as that of an old gentleman reading a newspaper. Here it goes. If alone after dinner, his great delight is the newspaper, which he prepares to read by wiping his spectacles, carefully adjusting them on his eyes, and drawing the candle close to him so as to stand sideways betwixt his ocular aim and the small tie. He then holds the paper at arm's length and, dropping his eyelids half down and his mouth half open, takes cognizance of the day's information. Equally vivid is Hunt's exact description of the poor, tired hackney coach horse. Can anything better illustrate the poet's line about ears that bring the philosophic mind? Then the still hung head, the dim, indifferent eye, the dragged and blunt cornered mouth, and the gaunt imbecility of body, dropping its weight on 3 tired legs in order to give response to the lame one. Fatigue and the habit of suffering have become as natural to the creature as the bit of its mouth. Once in half an hour, it moves the position from habit, then from pain. Its coat has become almost callous to minor stings. The blind and staggering fly in autumn might come to die against its cheek. Hunt's nature descriptions also, because of the close attention to detail, create effective images and demonstrate in convincing way Hunt's love of nature. For example, in one essay, he describes the trees and flowers in springtime. The description goes thus. Then the young green. This is the most apt and perfect mark of the season, the true issuing forth of the spring. The trees and bushes are putting forth their crisp fans. The lilac is loaded with bud. The meadows are thick with the bright young grass, running into sweeps of white and gold with the daisies and buttercups. The orchards announce their riches in a shower of silver blossoms. What a beautiful description. See, orchards announcing their riches. The earth is fertile. The earth in fertile woods is spread with yellow and blue carpets of primrose, violets, and hyacinths, over which the birch trees, like stooping nymphs, hang with their thickening hair. Lilies of the valley, stocks, columbines, lady smocks, and the intensely red peony, which seems to anticipate the full glow of summertime, all come out to wait upon the season, like fairies from their subterranean palaces. Hunt not only delineates external details well, but he is capable of revealing in a brief space rather complex emotions also. An example is his description of a young man eating an orange on an omnibus. Very ordinary day-to-day scene. Let's see how he describes. Hunt catches well not only the humor of the situation, but the young man's embarrassment at the eating in front of young ladies whom he wishes to impress does not proceed smoothly. Here it goes like this. Enter an unreflecting young gentleman who has bought an orange and must eat it immediately. He accordingly begins by peeling it and is first made aware of the delicacy of his position by the gigglement of the two young ladies and his doubt where he shall throw the peel. He is in for it, however, and must proceed. So, being unable to divide the orange into its segments, he ventures upon a great liquid bite, which resounds through the omnibus and covers the whole of the lower part of his face with pip and drip. The young lady with the ringlets is right before him. The two other young ladies stuff their handkerchiefs into their mouths, and he into his own mouth the whole of the rest of the fruit. Sloshy and too big, with desperation in his heart and the tears in his eyes. Never will he eat an orange again in an omnibus. He doubts whether he shall even venture upon one at all in the presence of his friends. There are many merits in his essays, but Hunt is no doubt at his best in his humorous descriptive essays such as Getting Up on Cold Mornings, which is prescribed for you also. So concentrate on this part of the discussion specially, in which essay he describes and rationalizes his reluctance to get out of bed on a cold morning. So how the reluctance of a person to get out of a bed on a cold morning is best described by Hunt goes like this. On my first movement towards the anticipation of getting up, I find that such parts of the sheet and bolster as are exposed to the air of the room are stone cold. We all of us are reluctant, in fact, to get up in the cold morning. On opening my eyes, the first thing that meets them is my own breath rolling forth as if in the open air, like smoke out of a chimney, a very common sight during winters. Think of this symptom. Then I turn my eyes sideways and see the window all frozen over. Think of that. Then the servant comes in. It is very cold this morning, is it not? Very cold, sir. Very cold indeed. Isn't it? Very cold indeed, sir. More than usually so, isn't it, even for this weather? Here the servant's wit and good nature are put to the considerable test, and the enquirer lies on thorns for the answer. Why, sir? I think it is. Good creature. There is not a better or more truth-telling servant going. I must rise, however. Get me some warm water. Here comes a fine interval between the departure of the servant and the arrival of hot water, during which, of course, it is of no use to get up. Yes, this gives an interlude to remain in the bed for some more time. There is an overnice propriety sometimes, an officious zeal of virtue, a little troublesome. Oh, the shirt you must air, my clean shirt. Linen gets very damp this weather. Yes, sir. Here another delicious 5 minutes. Notice, delicious 5 minutes. The dishes are delicious, but here those 5 minutes which will take the ironing will be delicious to him, as they will give him another comfortable moment to remain in bed in the cold morning. A knock at the door. Oh, the shirt. Very well. My stockings. I think the stockings had better be aired too. Very well, sir. Here another interval. At length, everything is ready except myself. So, the things are ready, but the person is not ready to get ready on a cold morning. Given such a delectable example, and there are several such, one wonders why Hunt's essays are so often patronized. They may be uneven, they may lack depth, they may not have Lamb's humor and pathos, but many are so delightful that even in an age that does not appreciate essays, they are to be enjoyed. Thank you very much.